ערב טוב. תפקידי בתוכנית של הערב המתקרבת לסיומה היא כיושב ראש להציג את האורח שלנו ובסוף להוסיף כמה הערות סיכום. Samir, we are delighted to have you with us. Let me say a few things about your background to enlighten the audience. Mr. Hulileh graduated from the American University of Beirut in 1983 with a master's degree in economics. He held various management positions in the private sector and participated in the multilateral and bilateral talks in Paris. Later, Mr. Hulileh joined the public sector as Deputy Minister of Trade and as a government secretary. Today, Mr. Hulileh directs one of the leading companies in Palestine, PADICO Holding. Please, Samir, we are delighted to have you, and we shall be listening to your presentation.
Thank you for the invitation, and sorry to be the last. I hope you can bear with me another 10-15 minutes. You know, my wife is a Yerushalayimite. What do you call it? She is Jerusalemite, Yerushalmi. And once an Israeli soldier asked her, "How come you don't speak Hebrew?" She said, "You know, I've never thought that you will stay that long." So I would say that preparing for a long occupation is different from preparing for a short one. The problem is that we have too long an occupation, one of the longest. And the problem with the time frame is that we and you change during that period. Both change. Usually a generation, 20, 30 years, is almost enough. So people, if they not communicate or are in contact daily with each other, they forget about who we were and what we are now in. And I think that's our situation now for the last, I would say, 13, 15 years. Since the Intifada, since the year 2000, we have lost contact and we forgot about who we are and who you are. I'm telling you, I am maybe personally in direct contact, but I am sometimes surprised to see how much we are becoming different people, different labor force, different leadership, not much, but, and so on. So the question is, how can you build a relationship in 1967, in 1987, in 2013, and you keep the same system, and you keep the same stereotype, and the same concepts and perceptions, as if the other side, you know him very well, you understand him very well, for sure, you know, while the other one is changing and you are changing. Do you remember when Israeli economists said that we, Israel, in the year 2000, Israel became too big for Palestine, and Palestine became too small for us? Although we have started somewhere with six times in the 67, but in the year 2000 or 2013, we are something like 20 folds, for example. So that's what I'm saying. Remember, life changes us very slowly to the fact that we don't realize how much these changes are basic and important and instrumental, that needs us to stop and think a little bit about how deep are these changes and what they should cause to both of us in our positions with each other. Remember, in the Arab world, when the Arab Spring happened 2 years ago, what happened is that you have leadership in the Arab world, the political leadership, have stagnated. Mubarak regime, Gaddafi regime, Bashar regime, whoever regime in the Arab world, they were the same for 40 years, 35 years, while the economy has changed, the youngsters have changed, the people, so everything changed, and they were not in touch with each other. They did not realize How deep are these changes that have caused the spring? So are we at the edge of a spring between us and you? My question is, do we really know each other? And do we know exactly where are we heading together in this region? I'll give you just one example that could surprise you. Because you still keep the same language when you speak about our labor force and employment. We have now in the West Bank and Gaza around 220,000 unemployed, among around 1 million people in the labor force, around 22-23%. And you may think that if you open up Israel for our workers, you will solve our problem of unemployment. I'm telling you now that it will not happen, because our labor force is different completely from our labor force 15 years ago. 2/3 of our labor force are university graduates who do not accept to work in Israel or to work in something that is handy. They think they are professors. You know, they understand geography, history, politics, but not being laborers in agriculture or in construction or whatever. So the structure of the labor force has changed dramatically. We are bringing to our labor force 40,000 university graduates every year, 40,000. Do you know that the number of students in our universities is higher than the number of students in the Israeli universities? We have 240,000 students in our universities. It doesn't mean that we have good quality. All what I'm saying is that we have a lot of people who graduate thinking that they are now part of a labor force that cannot absorb them, and Israel is not the destination, not anymore. So we are stuck with them, with our policies, sometimes poor policies of education and so on. And Israel thinks that it's a matter of choice. If I bring another 10,000 or 15,000, I can help or not help. Life has changed both of us. From our perspective, the private sector, I also have to tell you that we have changed. And maybe I would say that the last 3-4 years, the change was more dramatic in what we do. At the beginning, we thought, what's the role of the private sector under occupation? What shall we do? We were a bit sometimes shy of wearing suits because poverty was 40%. So to announce yourself as a businessman is a shame, in a sense, really. In particular in Gaza, for example, or in refugee camps in the West Bank. So what exactly, are we proud to be business people, employing people and trying to end poverty? I'm telling you, till 2005, 2006, we were not proud. We were a bit feeling that we are not part of the resistance to Israel, we are not part of the national movement, and we are not doing what we ought to do, which is ending occupation. We thought that ending occupation means doing politics, joining parties, and basically what others are doing is just generating profits, so their pockets will be full and they'll enjoy life, as if we are betraying the cause. This was the case till 2005, 2006. And you know how and who have changed that mindset? To be frank, is Dr. Salam Fayyad, the Prime Minister. He was the first courageous person to tell the people and the parties that misery in the refugee camps does not make resistance to Israel stronger. That employment is part of the resistance. Ending poverty is part of the resistance. Building a proper institutions for the state is part of the resistance, and not vice versa. Most of our political parties do not believe in that. And I would say that only in the last 4 or 5 years, since 2007 and 8, we have started to be proud to be business people doing business and creating jobs and ending unemployment and poverty by doing projects that you are proud of. And that's why when you go to Ramallah and you see proud people building Rawabi or building the city itself, you are not ashamed. And a politician or somebody or a gangster or whoever cannot curse us by saying you are betraying this or that and you are not part of the resistance. We believe that building a proper state and building a proper Palestinian as part of the international community and the regional community and cooperate with everybody is basically our pride and is basically what will bring a Palestinian state living in peace and prosperity with its neighbor, Israel or others. And this is a completely different mindset that I'm saying that we have, that's why I'm saying we have changed. However, I have to admit, I think Israel vis-a-vis us did not change. Meaning the position did not change. I'm sure Israel have changed a lot. But for example, and this is a question for you, do you believe that Israel is interested in building employment in the Palestinian territory, in Palestine? Maybe you will say all yes. And I'm telling you no. This is not true. No matter what is declared. And I'll tell you why. I'm talking about practicality now, from my perspective. Because if somebody is interested in employing more and more Palestinians and creating stability in the Palestinian territory, for sure he will be more generous with water in allowing us to dig more water in Palestine, not in Israel. I'm not talking about the political aspects of it. And he will allow and he will make sure that Gaza will not have 95% of water polluted. And he will make sure that the sewage of Gaza is not dumping everything in Gaza, and the same for part of the West Bank. And you will make sure that an authority headed by Salam Fayyad or Abu Mazen, you will not cut money or taxes or whatever on them. You will not squeeze them, because these are the ones who are creating the new state that will be next to you in peace and prosperity. However, I'm not here to accuse. All what I'm saying is that each of the parties has to stand a little bit and think about our relationship since long time ago and look at it from a strategic point of view. You need a vision and we need a vision. And I'll tell you a nice short story. It's recent. I was in a conference in Harvard in October 2012. And the meeting was for around 50 CEOs of major conglomerates, companies, who are operating in growth countries. Korea, Turkey, Brazil, Colombia, India, China, and others. And we were basically discussing for a day and a half, how did they make their growth as fast and as steady till they have reached what they have reached. And to our surprise, for example, I have seen that Turkey and Korea had the same exports like Palestine in 1968. We were similar, around $700 million of exports, and the same kind of exports, almost. Turkey was exporting the halloum and some agricultural goods and some basic folkloric aspects that we do, and the same for Korea. However, they managed to change completely their economy, and we did not. And I was there going to learn what and how to do that. And the most important lesson I have got back with me is that we should have a vision. We should have a long-term vision. They told me, forget about your authority or your government when they speak about 5-year plans or 3-year plans. It doesn't fit for you. You need a vision that will take you for 20 years. Because then you will be able to build an educational system that will fit that. You can put infrastructure that will fit that. But building a power station needs 5 to 6 years. How can you have a plan that will end in 5 years? Because building a power station is not an end, it's just an infrastructure for something else. And the same for water, and the same for roads, and the same. So in my way back from Harvard, I passed through Paris, and I've met McKinsey company, and I started negotiating with them to come and do for us what we call a Palestinian private sector agenda 2030. We want to see Palestine in 2030. However, they asked me immediately, under which political assumption? I told them continued occupation. Israel will be with us, controlling us. This is the status quo. This is the worst case scenario. We want it. I want this worst case scenario. However, I want you to tell me, what shall I do to make sure that unemployment will not be 24, but 10% in 7 years? And I want to make sure that you tell me in 17 years that I can be able to export $10 billion of exports and not $700 million. If you cannot do that, if you cannot promise that, I don't need your study. They immediately reacted to me in a different way. They said, look, we want to make sure that you are serious business people, and we want to make sure that you have a serious government, because most of that could be related to policies. They didn't ask me about Israel, because I've told them neutralize Israel. They are as worse as they could be, so forget about them. Let's talk about us. Can we maximize our employment and end poverty under the circumstances? And this is a very interesting challenge for economists, even in Israel. Their answer was, yes, we can. They have started in January 15 working on the plan, and at the end of May, their plan will be ready. It will be a vision for us that is not shared yet by our government, not by our politicians, not by Israel even, because this will be a roadmap for us to tell us, with hope, with confidence, that there is something we can do in spite of the situation and despite of occupation. This is simple, the issue. We have to have hope. Without hope, you cannot do anything. Without hope, Rawabi could not be built. Without hope, we cannot have a power station in Jenin after 5 years, depending on gas coming from Israel. Without hope, without believing that we can change something in this situation. So without accusing or reacting to what's happening, all what I'm saying in this context, that Israel can be a secure place and can guarantee the safety and security of its citizens by building a wall, of course. Israel also can do that by having a very powerful army, for sure. Israel also can have a nuclear power and make sure that it has this deterrence to governments or countries like Iran or Pakistan or whoever, of course. But is this enough? I'm talking about a vision, not about a tactic, not about 2 years from now. I'm talking about a vision, sustainable one, long term. Do you think that building proper relationship with your neighbors is also will bring safety and security for Israel and the Israelis? Do you think that making your neighbor having an unemployment of around 10%, similar to you, or poverty like around 10 or 12%, will be basically adding to your safety and security? Because if this is the answer, strategically, I would say that Israel has to change a lot of its policies vis-a-vis West Bank and Gaza, no matter if occupation continues or not. I'm not speaking politics here. I'm talking about the relationship that I'm talking about under the status quo, not changing. Because that's a challenge. If you don't realize this, if you only depend on the wall and on your power, you are basically misleading not just the world, but your citizens. You are misleading the Jews of the world that you are under attack all the time because you are not doing as a government what you ought to do with your neighbors, including Palestinians. This does not justify that Islamists who will come in Syria or in Egypt could think of attacking Israel. I'm not saying that, I'm not defending that possibility or scenario. All what I'm saying is, did Israel and does Israel do its best to guarantee the safety and security of its borders and its citizens with all the means and weapons that it could have, including political, economic, social, cultural, and security? The answer, I think, is not. I'm a bit tired when discussing things with Israelis, and I have been discussing this with Israelis since '88. Not much, around 25 years. I'm talking about normal Israelis. When we speak about peace, they will immediately tell me the following, and I can, of course, tell you these stories. Some of them you are convinced with, some of them you are not. There is no partner in Palestine. Of course, we have withdrawn from Gaza, and look what we have got, rockets. We have done the same in South Lebanon, look what we have got, of course. You can have, and you are divided. How can we make agreements with whom? With Abu Mazen or with Haniyeh? With whom shall we? All these are tactful questions and answers. Forget about them. This is not serious. The one who are talking to me with these assumptions or with these issues is not serious. Because I'm talking about a vision. I'm talking about your life and my life, your future and my future. We have to have long term. We have to think together for long term. And that's where my question will come to you. But before that, I need to highlight just two issues, small ones, for you in our mind as Palestinians. The establishment of the State of Israel, and I would basically speak about 1922 to 1948, for us, is basically the Jews of the world coming, establishing colonies in Palestine, and then having control of Palestine in 1948. That was the story from our perspective. This story in 1967 is exactly the opposite, but the same end, the same result. You have started with control of the territories, and then you have established colonies in the West Bank in particular, and you will end up with having in the West Bank Jews and Muslims, Palestinians and Israelis, no matter what's the balance, as exactly you are having in Israel proper. The question is, what will you do with them? What is your offer to your neighbors or your country people, like in Israel? What's the offer? This is important. Are you offering fairness, justice, same rights? Will you be doing that for the West Bankers, us, in the future? Forget about Palestinian state. We don't want to speak about an option of establishing a Palestinian state. What's your offer for us in 20 years from now when you have 1 million settlers in the West Bank and we are around 4 million in the West Bank? What will be your offer to us? Did any of the parties in Israel present in the election or through the election, this or the one before, or any elections in their programs, a vision? And I'm talking about a vision, not about a tactic. About how do they see this part of the world, while Israel is in the heart of it, permanent. I'm not talking about something temporarily, permanent in the region. But how will they rebuild their relationship with their neighbors, including the Palestinians? I think this is required. It's not just required by Prime Minister Netanyahu. It's required by all parties. It's required by regular Israeli citizens. They need to know, and they need to learn, and they need to believe. Where are they heading? You're all here in this room like my age and above. So you'll be staying for another 20 years. We will be staying for another 20 years maybe. What about our children? That's why I need a plan for our children, not for us. And I think you should think about it, because again, you may stay for another 5, 10, or 15, or 20. But we are the ones who have had the experience. We are the ones who have had a long history of conflict. We had the agonies of fighting together. And I think we should be the ones to present a roadmap to our children for the future. So basically, a vision about a future Israel in the region, a vision about a future Palestine in the region, I would say is important to consider now. I don't want to interfere in how you develop it. I don't want to interfere in your imagination, dreams. How do you want to do it? Just do something. Tell me, where are your borders? Tell me, how are you going to protect it and prevent and bring safety and security for Israelis and Jews all over the world? Because sometimes you may protect Israel, but not protect Israelis all over the world. You cannot prevent any boycott against Israel if it could happen like in South Africa. I'm not calling for it, but I'm saying a wise policy by a government should take all this into consideration. You thought that Mubarak will be lasting. He's not. We thought that Bashar al-Assad will be forever. I don't know. Things are changing, and you have to build a relationship with your neighbors with a vision that is practical, pragmatic, and adaptable to the situation. And that's our responsibility also. Look, I'm not telling you to do something that we have done. We did not do that also. We did not do that. We have only a map of a Palestinian state. We know in principle what we are having vis-a-vis Jerusalem and the refugees. However, we think this is a bit short-term, because what will be Palestine in the future? How will we connect to Gaza? How can we build a nationhood or a nationhood between West Bank and Gaza together in one Palestine while Israel is in the middle? And what kind of a Palestinian economy we'll be having? A lot of questions needs also a vision and some imagination from our side. We did not do our homework properly, but also you did not do that. So in order not to go into more discussion on this, and my feeling at the end of it is that my feeling, and it's reflecting me personally, I think there is no constituency for peace in Israel. Constituency for peace for Israel, I mean a big, powerful lobby in the government or elsewhere who have a vision about the end result. Not talking about the tactics. Do we have a partner? What about Hamas? These are small things in the process. A vision and an end result to this conflict. Because when this is formulated in your mind, it's like a constitution. Then you can fight for it till you die. You fight for it because this is basically the future of your children. It's not the status quo. Status quo is not preserving us or preserving you, as I see it. I'm sorry to speak about this again, but my belief is that two things that I will end with. I'm sorry that I've took all that time. I don't want us to go back to 3,000 years and to have Muslims and Jews against each other in this region. Because we are going into that direction, not because we want it, but it's happening, because we are not properly solving our problems. Why don't I want to go into that future, that possibility? Because when you go to Jerusalem or to Jericho or to any part of the Holy Land and dig in history, go down in the layers of civilizations that crossed through that place, you will see one civilization killing the other one and bringing its whatever virtues above it. Nobody have managed to live with the other through 17 civilizations that have crossed this Holy Land. Each was trying to terminate the other because the basis of the conflict at that time was more religious. Religion terminates the other, while we in the modern world do not do that. We look for potential cooperation, we look for other possibilities. So if we are going back into this Islam, Judaism, Christianity or whatever, in a holy land which is more sacred than ever, I think we are basically missing an opportunity in understanding what does it mean to be in a holy land. It's tolerance, it's cooperation. It's not just us neighboring each other. I'm talking about the deep understanding of a holy land is an acceptance and tolerance of the other. So what's the formula of this tolerance? What's the formula of this acceptance? I don't know if it is done. We see it with the settlers in the West Bank differently. Maybe with people living in Tel Aviv, we will define it differently. But again, that's why I'm saying Israel as a whole has to define this very clearly. I wouldn't say more out of this, but thank you very much for your patience. And I was just speaking from my heart to you about what's concerned me after 25 years of doing peace together. Thank you.